but it would take a lot of searching, and it may or may congratulatory. city.
Under the state of Hawaii, where we were under the state of Hawaii.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Maitland City Council meeting of September 22nd, 2022. If you please remember to silence your phones and any other devices. And let's begin this meeting with a moment of silence. Please join me. Thank you. And if you are willing and able, would you please join me in saying the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Let's start off with our public hearings. Laura, would you please read the resolution of the ad valorem tax rate orders?
A resolution adopting 4.3453 mil ad valorem tax levy upon all real and personal property for the appropriation to the general operating expenses of the city. A 0.218 mil voted debt service levy upon all real and personal property for appropriation to the city of Maitland for resolution tax general obligation refunding note to the city of Maitland, Florida, commencing on October 1, 2022 and ending on September 30, 2023, authorizing the city manager or designee of the city to certify such millage and providing for an effective date.
Thank you, Lori. Mark, would you like to introduce the item for us?
Absolutely. Fighting over the flipper. Mark Regenty, interim city manager. What I'd like to do is just remind you how we got where we are tonight. Back in January, staff started reviewing and putting together their budget proposals for this year. As part of that review, the capital improvements portions of a couple of the budgets go through board reviews. The Transportation, Lakes, and Parks and Rec Advisory Board review and make recommendations on the capital portions. That usually happens in March. In June, the budget draft is issued. In July, we had the general fund budget workshop where we went over in some detail revenues and expenditures in the general fund. On July 19th, we heard from the library and the art and history centers regarding their budgets and their budget proposals, which are incorporated into the budget you're going to see tonight. On July 25th, you set the tentative millage rate at the current millage rate that we used to put together our final budget proposals. On August 1st, we had the Enterprise and Special Revenue Fund budget workshop where we went over the water and sewer funds and stormwater funds and a couple other little funds that we have to track separately. On August 22nd, you established the stormwater rates, which we based this year's budget on. Just 2 weeks ago, in September, on the 12th, you had your first reading for the millage rate, budget, and CIP. The ads were published in the Sentinel, so those have been out on the street. And tonight brings us to the final adoption and public hearing for millage rate, budget, and CIP. As far as the summary of the budget, this year we're proposing a balanced budget, maintaining our current millage rate at 4.3453 mils. That plus our other revenues that we talked about at the budget workshops generate about a little over $33 million in revenue to the city. As you can see here, that balances out with the expenditures on that side of the budget. We're still having to put some of the things off that we have talked about over the years. They'll have to be addressed in the out years of the budget, but this budget goes a long way to meeting the priorities that were established by the City Council during our strategic planning session over the last few years. In addition to the millage rate, we also have a voted debt millage. This voted debt millage was approved by the residents of the city to build City Hall, fire, and police stations. We've just made the debt service payment back in July. As you can see, we're projecting a decrease over the 3 years shown on this slide. This year, we're proposing to establish that millage rate at 0.218. And just, I'm sure you'll remember this slide. This shows the history of our voted debt millage. We're looking at that to decrease over the years as we get closer to 2034, 35, where it'll be all cleared out by then. So that will go away. Blue line, as a reminder, shows the cap. When this was voted in, we capped it at 0.5 mils. You can see we touched that a few years, but after that, we've just been trending downward through the years. So that's the overview. We'll get into some more details as we talk about the budget itself, but the first item is to establish the two millage rates. So we would make a recommendation that we keep the millage rate the same and establish the voted millage rate at 0.2180 after you receive public input.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions, Mr. Regentine? And if there are none, let's open the public hearing on this. To set that millage, does anybody from the public like to address us on this issue?
Okay, Dale McDonald, 108 Tangelo Court. I've seen a few of these. So the tax base, the taxable value of the real property in the city of Maitland essentially increased 11.3%. And is that correct, Mark?
Do you want me to address that?
Well,
Mr. Mayor.
you can ask me, and we'll follow up questions when we're done. But I guess that's, yeah, if I can answer quickly your question, is the rollback rate. So
Right, I understand.
That.
So what I was specifically interested in was the amount of the increase from the past fiscal year of the taxable property in the entire city, and how much that increased. So I was taking it from that number. That was the basis. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dale. Anybody else from the public like to address this issue? Seeing none, let's close the public period. Mark, is it correct to say that it's the 11.3% rollback rate is essentially what is the increase in taxable base?
Yes, we're looking at 11.3% increase in the tax base in the city this year.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Does anybody have any questions of Mark? And if not, would anybody like to make one of the first of the two motions we need to get through this tonight?
Oh, good. Move to set an operating millage for the 2022 tax year as 4.3453, which is 11.3% above the rollback rate of 3.9043.
Okay, we have a motion.
Second.
And a second. Laura, would you please read the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay. We got that done. Would anybody like to make another motion?
I move to set the voted debt millage rate for the 2022 tax year as 0.2180 for a combined total millage rate of 4.5633 mils.
We have a motion
No second.
and a second. Laura, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Mark. We have set the tax rate for fiscal year 2023. Now we have resolutions dealing with the 2023 annual budget. Laura, would you like to read the title for that?
A resolution of the City of Maitland, Florida, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2022 and ending September 30th, 2023, appropriating funds for operating expenses, supplies, personnel, and otherwise appropriating funds for the efficient and effective operation of the government of the city of Maitland and all its operations and functions for the fiscal year ending September 30th, 2023, providing a means to amend the said annual budget so as to carry forward the funding of purchase orders, work orders, and grants outstanding as of September 30th, 2022, providing a means to amend the said annual budget to reflect grants received after September 30th, 2022, authorizing the transfer of funds herein appropriated so long as the total combined appropriations shall not be increased thereby, adopting the revenues and expenditures, and the position authorizing the table, adopting the ad valorem property tax millage upon the assessment roll for the tax year 2022, adjusting the ad valorem property tax millage rate, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Mark, would you like to tell us how we're going to wisely and efficiently spend all this tax money?
I will do my best. As far as the general fund budget goes, this is the general fund overview. There's a little bit easier copy to read in your packet. As I said, we're generating a little bit over $33 million in revenues this year from ad valorem taxes and other taxes and fees. 30 million of that goes to general operations. This leaves a little bit over 3 million for general fund CIP and recommendations. I'll talk about the recommendations here in just a minute. As you can see on this page, you also see some budget reductions. If you remember, those are the vehicles that were budgeted in next fiscal year that we bought out of this fiscal year. So we brought this year's budget up, taking next year's budget down by that $100,000. The last box on this table shows your fund balances with the designations. We're not changing much here. We are proposing to move $841,000 from undesignated to the emergency fund that keeps it at 15%, and to the, which is our policy to keep at least 15% in the emergency fund. And we're replenishing the vehicle designation fund due to the cost of vehicles. That on top of the depreciation, we're going to we're proposing to bring that up a little over $500,000. The other thing that's changed from last year to this year is we have realized the ARPA funding, so we put that in a designation that we will, after the budget's adopted, we'll schedule a meeting to talk about how we want to spend that ARPA funding. It's a little bit over $8 million. So as an overview, that's generally how the budget sits. As far as recommendations this year go, there are just a few recommendations that we're approving. The first is, as we discussed at a couple of at the budget workshops, in order to help recruitment and retention of employees, one of the weaker points in our benefit system that we've looked at is our health insurance. The city currently funds 100% of the health insurance for the employee and around 50% for the dependent coverage. Based upon survey of our surrounding communities, it showed we were not very competitive with that, where they're covering 75 to 80% of dependent coverage. So if we're going to become and remain competitive in the marketplace, we need to improve that benefit. So we're proposing to increase the dependent benefit to cover 80% of the dependent health care costs. That's shown in the first line there. We're estimating that to be a little bit under $200,000. As far as personnel goes, we are recommending a streets foreman. As I mentioned at the last meeting we had, this is going to be a working foreman to do day-to-day oversight of the crews, to free up the street supervisor so he can focus on the planning, scheduling, maintenance, to track the pavement management system, manage paving projects, and also oversee the contractual repairs, which are significant. So what this also does is create two-man crews. Right now we have a one-man crew and a two-man crew, which improves safety for the one person that's out working alone, and also improves accountability when you have two folks working together. So those are the only two recommendations we have. In terms of the other funds, the water and sewer fund, this is how the expenditures are laid out. The largest portion, as we talked about in the workshop, is contractual services. That's on the sewer side. Since we don't do our own sewage treatment, we contract with Altamont and Snookwater, and City of Orlando's Iron Bridge treatment facilities to treat our wastewater. The rest just goes to operations, maintenance, some depreciation, and debt service as laid out in the pie chart here. The Solid Waste Fund is the largest expenditure in this fund is contractual services again, which accounts for almost 75% of the fund's expenditures. This includes mostly charges for waste hauling from Waste Pro and solid waste disposal fees from Seminole County and now Orange County, since we're hauling to Orange County now. Last fiscal year in 22, we had a 4.5% increase of solid waste disposal charges from Seminole County. They're late again. They were late this year in getting us those increases. I think we're looking at another 4.5% this year coming from Seminole County. We also had a 4% increase in residential and commercial solid waste, yard waste, and recycling from Waste Pro, and a 6% increase in the administrative reimbursement to the general fund. So on the Waste Pro side, there's a formula within their contract that determines how their increases are determined. That's what's shown in the table down there. As you can see, over the last 2 years, those have been very low because the cost of gas was low. And the CPI was low. Obviously, that's changed this year. So that formula works out. They can recover 90% of the CPI for last year, which is $7.56. They can also recover 10% of the fuel index, which is went up 32%. And the total increase came out to $10.77 that they would have normally been allowed, except for there is a cap within their contract at 4%. So when they cap out, the most they can get is 4%. So even though the indexes showed a 10%, almost 11% increase, their contract caps them out at 4%. So that's their increased cost for this year. It is more expensive, as I mentioned, as we were dealing with some of the waste hauling issues earlier this year, to haul to Orange County. It's more efficient for us to do that on the commercial side due to the longer hours that they're open down there. So we're going to be monitoring that over the next several months, along with the increase at Seminole County, which may force us to come back and take a look at an adjustment on the commercial side to balance those additional costs. But we're fine to start the budget year. Stormwater Fund, again, most of this budget, almost 70% is operational, 32% is capital. We are recommending one position, that is the staff engineer. As we talked about over the last couple months, our stormwater division has been mostly relying on consulting engineers for design inspection services for our larger CIP projects. This position would focus on those engineering reviews to reduce the need for the outside consulting engineer, along with supporting staff and residents in terms of designing and implementing smaller projects. We have a lot of little drainage projects around the city that we can focus on, so we'll be able to take care of those in-house versus farming those out to one of our consulting engineers. It gives us a lot more control over timing and what goes into those and how those are prioritized. It also will help out to relieve some of the director's time. Kim spends a lot of her time doing a review of the stormwater projects that are coming through, so that will free up her time to focus more on the administrative functions that need attention in the department. So, after taking public input, we would need a motion to approve the general fund, utility fund, solid waste, stormwater, and voted debt budgets, as well as the position authorization table.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Does anybody have any questions, Mark?
Yeah, Mark, I just want to talk about our contractual services, farming, people out like consulting, inspectors, all these that we do. Have we really looked at, and maybe this is something we need to talk about next year, but have y'all done an analysis to say, and it's asking this question, I know that sometimes we use them, sometimes we don't, but it's not a full-time employee. Mm-hmm. But have we looked at it and said, is it more cost-effective to pay more for a full-time employee or is it more cost efficient to just have these services?
When we ran, it varies. We ran the numbers year by year on how we spend that money out of the, specifically out of the stormwater fund. And sometimes we're spending up to $150,000 a year. Sometimes it's as low as $50,000 or $60,000 a year.
I'm talking like in general. We have the inspectors. We pay a lot for them and stuff.
Well, on the inspection side, the issue there is just to be able to find inspectors. That's, between the building official and the inspectors, it's much more lucrative for them to be on the private side because they can pay more. We're going to be looking at that as we do our class and comp, our pay plan study this year, to try to make those positions more competitive so we can bring those back in-house, because it's always better to have those positions under your control versus under consultant control. As far as larger design projects, some of the big stuff, with the resources that the bigger engineering firms have, that's usually where you would want to go for those anyway. So if we had additional staff engineers in-house, that it was unlikely that they would be doing the larger design projects, that they would be responsible for signing and sealing. It's still better to use a consulting firm for something like that.
So it's really yes or no, because it's like this, yes, that, no.
Yeah. So we're looking to start that.
Stormwater, yes. and-
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. Is anybody from the public, let's open those public hearings, anybody from the public like to address us on this matter? Seeing none, let's close the public hearing. Is there any further discussion? If not,
Oh, the emergency fund, is that fully vetted? We got all we need in it, and how much is that?
Yeah,
again?
15% is what's there. Let me jump back to that table. And that's currently sitting at,
You good, Vince?
Huh?
a little over $4 million.
$4 million?
Yep.
Yes.
I'll move to approve the resolution adopting, actually, I'm going to move to adopt the general fund budget of $33,057,000, utilities fund budget of $19,607,000, solid waste budget of $3,050,200, and stormwater environmental utility budget of $2,057,300, voted debt service budget of $818,575, and position authorization table for fiscal year 2023.
I'll second.
motion in a second, Lauren, call the roll.
Councilmember Paul Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Councilmember Weil.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, thank you, Mark. We have several right-of-way abandonments, and one we, Laura, you all come by ordinances, so you have to read the ordinance titles. Start with Lake Catherine Drive.
An ordinance of the city of Maitland vacating and abandoning a portion of Lake Catherine Drive right-of-way according to the plat thereof, as reported in Plat Book R, page 47 of the Public Records Board County, more particularly described in Exhibit A, contingent upon rededication of previously vacated right-of-way, providing for conflicts, recording, and effective date.
Okay, thank you. Kim, would you like to introduce the item for us?
Yes, in 2021, the city vacated a very small portion of the right-of-way adjacent to 815 Lake Catherine Drive. It was at the request of the property owners. They were trying to rebuild a dock to meet current codes. As they got into construction, they found that they had requested the wrong location, so they came back to us asking to shift that over to build the dock at the correct location. So they are willing to dedicate back the previously vacated right-of-way, and they're asking for this new portion of right-of-way to be vacated. Staff doesn't have any objections, provided that the deed is executed and recorded.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions of Ms. Tracy? All right, let's open it up to the public. Anybody have, the public have anything they'd like to address about this? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And a motion will be in order.
I would move to adopt an ordinance to vacate and abandon a portion of Lake Catherine Drive as presented.
Motion?
Second.
Yes, sir.
I'm the second kid.
Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Councilmember Weil,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Aye. Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, let's move to the right-of-way abandonment for Perry Street. Laura, would you read the title?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, vacating and abandoning a portion of Perry Street, also known as Ford's Avenue, right-of-way according to the plat thereof, Thompson subdivision as recorded in Plat Book Q, page 1 of the Public Records of Orange County, Florida, more particularly described in Exhibit A, providing for conflicts, recording, and an effective date.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, would you like to introduce this item?
Yes, I'm here for Dan on this item. He had gone over this vacate at the introduction, so I'm here just to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Any questions of Kim? Anybody from the public like to address council on this item? Seeing none, let's close the public period.
I'll move to adopt an ordinance to vacate and abandon a portion of Perry Street on Ford's Avenue as presented.
Have a motion?
Second.
And a second. Laura, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Weil,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison. Aye. Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, now let's have the ordinance regarding the Howell Branch Road abandonment.
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, vacating and abandoning a portion of Howell Branch Road right-of-way according to the plat thereof, as recorded in Plat Book T, page 7 of the Public Records of Orange County, more particularly described in Exhibit A, providing for conflicts, recording, and an effective date.
Okay, thank you. And Kim, would you like to introduce this item?
And again, same thing, we went over this one in detail during the introduction, so
Okay.
if there's any questions, I can answer.
Any questions for Kim? None. How about, let's open the public period. Anybody from the public like to address us on this right-of-way abandonment? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And motion be in order.
Move to adopt an ordinance to vacate and abandon a portion of Howell Branch Road as presented.
Second. Motion and a second.
From the street.
Laura, would you?
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison,
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Councilmember Weil,
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, the next ordinance is the construction and demolition franchise agreement.
No, with the CIP.
CIP, I'm sorry, got it there. CIP, Laura, would you please read the ordinance title of CIP 2023-2027?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending ordinance 1389 in direct relation to the capital improvements program, Table 1, amending the governance and implementation element of the Maitland Comprehensive Development Plan 2035 CDP to replace Table 7.1 Capital Improvements Program to recognize the annual update of the City of Maitland's 5-year CIP, amending the CDP relating to Orange County Public Schools to recognize the annual update of the Orange County Public Schools 10-year capital outlay plan, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Mark, would you like to introduce
Sure.
this?
You've just adopted the budget that includes the capital improvements program. The next step, as mandated by state statute, is that you include that 5-year plan within the comprehensive development plan. The state requires us to look out 5 years, which we have always done here in Maitland, but not every city has, to ensure that we have revenue sources to balance our capital projects. So we have to do that analysis, put that in the CDP to show that we are going to be able to maintain levels of service on our systems that we've adopted within the CDP. This is the 5-year CDP. It's an annotated table. It's not the same as the going to the comp plan. It was illegible on a slide, but it is attached to your agenda item. It's $14 million this year and $61 million through 2027. Obviously, the biggest are general fund and, of course, our utilities fund right now with the the capital program we have laid out for the utilities fund. So based upon that, we would recommend adoption.
Okay, any questions or more on this?
I don't have a question, but I just want to say, I like to see that we're putting a lot of money to the projects that aren't really that, beautiful and make us look better, but it's the things that every household needs, like the lift stations and, the storm waters and everything like that. And I think, I just wanted to say, hopefully, even though we only have, looks like, $1 million next year and 750, I hope we look at it and even increase that and get done what really needs to be done. That's about it.
All right, thanks. Anybody from the public like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And there be a motion on this? Yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Special.
Okay. Public comment, further discussion, motion in order, right?
Yep.
I'll move to adopt an ordinance to approve the fiscal year 2023 to 2027 capital improvements program, including revised Table 1, to update Table 1 within Chapter 7, governance, and the implementation element, capital improvements sub-element of the 2035 CDP to recognize the annual update of the 5-year CIP and recognize the annual update of the Orange County Public Schools 10-year capital outlay plan as presented.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Lori, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel. Aye. Councilmember Wild. Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, now let's go to CD, debris removal franchise agreement. Lori, would you read the ordinance title, please?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, granting Wake Office Hauling LLC a non-exclusive franchise to provide roll-off containers collection and disposal of waste within the City of Maitland, Florida, outlining the franchisee's duties and providing for terms and conditions under which such franchise will operate, providing for severability and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Mark? would you like to-
As we talked about at the last meeting when this was introduced, when we did the Waste Pro contract, we exempted construction demolition waste from that, because if you give that franchise, you're sort of tied into them, and any builder, any homeowner would be doing in need of a roll-off would have to go to them, and those rates would be fixed. So we took a more of a free market approach to this to allow anyone that qualified under the code to come into the city and set up a full franchise. So that gives businesses and homeowners the ability to shop around for their C&D needs to get the cheapest price for their needs. So this is just another one of the haulers that has come in, meets the requirements, and based upon that, we recommend approval.
Okay. Anybody have any questions, Mark? Questions? Anybody from the public would like to address the council on this item? Seeing none, let's close the public period. If there is no further discussion, the motion will be in order.
Move to adopt an ordinance granting a non-exclusive franchise agreement to Week Office Hauling LLC as presented.
I second that.
Motion and a second. Lori, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
And Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay. All right, are we going to? Yes. We're going to adjourn. Can we just hear anything?
We do that after, we still have this as a public hearing.
Okay, all right, turn, that's right.
Yes.
All right. Laura, would you read the ordinance title, please?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, submitting to the electors of Maitland proposed amendments to the charter of the City of Maitland, providing for ballot titles, summaries, and text for the proposed amendments, providing direction to the city clerk, providing for severability, providing for an effective date for approved amendments, providing for an effective date of the ordinance.
Okay, Laura, you get to handle this one. Would you like to do that, introduce the item.
Okay, we've gone through these a few times. This one of the clarification of the term limits. This was recommended by the Charter Review Commission to clarify how long a mayor who has to serve 2 terms must sit out for being eligible to qualify again. We're proposing the language be put in opposed to 1 election cycle or approximately 1 year. We'll put in the until 1 year after the end of their last term. So this would be the example of Jane Smith, whose 3-year, second, 3rd-year term as mayor is concluded April 11th, 2022. She wouldn't be eligible to qualify in the election until January of 2024 for the March 2024 election and take office in April. Basically ineligible for the 2023 election.
Okay.
Discussion on that or wait till?
Yeah, let's go ahead and just take them one at a time, because I think now we're familiar enough with them, we can just deal with them as they come through. Does anybody have any comments on this?
Yeah, I do, and I wanted to share it with you. I'll have copies if anybody needs it. But when we were reading that, that was just for the mayor, correct? Lori?
Yes, I believe when this was initially proposed from the Charter Review Commission report, it was initially looked at as a whole, and I think through the series of, and Mark can back me up on this, communications and times you guys have visited this at council, that you agreed just to address solely the mayors.
So I would like to offer a suggestion. As you see in C, we do have a date to start, and it shall commence at the beginning of the 2nd council meeting. But we don't have an end date. So in D, where you see approximately 1 year, I would suggest add in after last date served in office. And then I believe, I'm not a lawyer, you guys are the lawyers, everybody here except me. So I believe then you could probably get rid of F, because that's just being a little redundant of what you already have stated above.
So one more time, Nancy, you would add
You're
language?
looking at the.
At D? Yeah, I'm looking at the original version, I'm sorry, John.
The original, okay.
Yeah.
I've got the charter.
Okay.
Yeah,
And then where it says in D, in parentheses, approximately 1 year,
Mhm.
go ahead and make that after the last date served in office. And then that would kind of make F just kind of redundant because you already have it stated above. And then that would cover both mayors and council people. You know, our whole thought here is we want new people to come in, but how we have it stated here in F, it gives somebody the right just to come back 8 months later and run for office again.
What's actually looking
2.1, just citing F.
2.01.
Reciting F and
So you guys are lawyers, you tell me what you think. I just want to suggest that.
You would like to approximately after 1 year from their last date.
So on this one, aren't what we're adding in C and F being a little bit redundant?
Yeah, I think you should just get rid of F.
We need F if we amend C.
You meant C or D?
The current amendment
D,
is on
well,
for C.
D.
But listen, but Vance is suggesting we,
Add language to D also.
So you have an end date,
So
An
it'd
end
be,
date.
start date and an end
so it'd be
date.
similar to the language addressing the mayor.
Right. Yeah.
So essentially, you would like the same language for the mayor and council members?
Correct, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the effect would be that a council person has to wait.
The year and 8 months. Whether you're running it.
Right. Whereas currently they only have to wait a year.
Well, not even a year.
Kick it off in April and they sign up to run in January.
Yeah.
Right.
So really, I mean, if you think about it, if I'm running for office and I come back, really I'm running almost as an incumbent. So, I mean, it's just like,
You've been off for a year.
I've been off for 8 months, and then I'm going to start running again. So if you do 2 years, which you do for the mayor, then that gives a cool down period. And you get more people in, as y'all were wanting to get fresh blood. I think that was most of the discussion I remember.
I wasn't here for, the original conversations about this. Is there, I mean, the obvious difference to me is if there's only one seat of mayor and there's multiple seats of city council, and in a circumstance we're talking about where someone comes back right away, they're not running obviously for the same seat they occupied, even though there's no real difference in that. But so other than that, is there some reason why we were treating these things differently, or is it just the way that they arose? Or?
Yeah, well, I think there's a long history of this, and it all occurred about the time of, or just prior to the last 2012 Charter Review Commission.
There you go.
And it was kind of a reaction to what happened at that time. This is my view. This is my view of history. I was around then, so I remember it. But the issue, I think, in a nutshell, was that a vice mayor had been appointed, and the mayor thereafter resigned to run for a different office out of the city. And the vice mayor found himself being the mayor, and he was the mayor for a significant period of time. And so he hadn't been elected mayor, but I think he served close to 2 years as mayor, maybe it's
Less than.
somewhere in that neighborhood. And so the issue, kind of what you were raising, Lori, last time, which was, you weren't elected to that position, but he ended up serving in that position, just because that's the way the charter ran. And I think there was some factionalism going on about the time, and some people thought that wasn't a good idea, that the mayor should, well, this goes into the next one, where we're also going to have this discussion, where the mayor should have to run again for that seat. So that all this was kind of percolating about at the same time. In this case, I think there was a particular notion that they wanted the mayor to sit out so that he wouldn't come back and run again in that interim. So that's why Section F reads that way, which is very clear that they want to make a distinction between a council person and a mayor. They're leaving the council people alone. Council person only has to sit out the 8 months, I guess, or whatever. I mean, before you run from one seat to a different seat. You get turned out, but then you have 8 months off and you can run again. Nobody seemed to have a problem with that. What they did have a problem with was the mayor coming back and doing that. Because I think they felt like, I don't know what they felt like, but it was the sentiment was he had his time and he needs to sit out some time. So, and whether or not if that was tailored to personalities at the time, or whether that's kind of more of a policy issue, is I guess for us to consider.
I guess my question is, really, what's the difference between a mayor and a council person? When you make the agenda,
yeah,
your vote's just as good as my vote. So if I can come back a couple of years later and make a change, you know what I'm saying? No, I know. Listen, I'm not trying to downplay it.
I'm just looking at certain facial expressions. It's delightful.
We could just
Should I go ahead and get a laugh?
just get rid of like that 5 city council people and just rotate the mayor.
then you just have a vice mayor.
Well, I mean, I guess in reference to, as a policy issue, I'm in favor of term limits with basically no limit on that. So I am very, so that policy I have, that philosophy I have, would certainly extend to council members the same as those mayors. I would be inclined to support either, so I have no problem with what's there because I'm in favor of what's there. I also have no problem with what you're suggesting, which only extends that.
Okay, I would say this as well, that the Charter Review Commission, and I was on the Charter Review Commission this time around, so I know this, that nobody ever considered that was a problem. This really was just a cleanup item because the question had come up is this provision vague enough that the mayor, somebody running for a mayor seat would not understand that he has to sit out more than 1 year? So this is really strictly a cleanup issue, and I think now we're turning it into a policy issue where the Charter Review Commission didn't see one, and we've never talked about one. We've only talked about this in terms of, can we clean this up so nobody's confused about it? I think if we want to start having a substantive discussion, you know, the night that we're supposed to adopt the ordinance is not the time to start doing that.
I actually think I would pass on this one. I wouldn't even put it on because I think F clarifies it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I am. I kind of feel like, you know, we already have the interpretation of it. It's not going to change. We just leave it alone. So.
I wouldn't touch it. Personally, I would pass on putting this on.
Just want you to know, on F, we are proposing to put year after the end of the last person's term, and not put it up there.
And I don't think it's needed.
Okay.
That's fine.
So scratch F, C, and F.
I just don't think, I would limit, my opinion on charter amendments is that we should limit them to unless necessary and keep them short and keep the questions simple. And I don't think this one, I think trying to explain the fact that we didn't word this right the first time and this is fair, I just think I think we've interpreted a certain way. We're the interpreters of it. I think I would not touch it. Personally, I would pass on putting this one on the agenda, on the ballot.
Anybody else you have an opinion on this one?
I think that you sat as chair of that review committee, and if you were seeing it as something that was necessary to clean up language, and that was really the intention of it, then I think that as council, we need to respect the fact that the Charter Review Commission came forward with this recommendation on that basis. And given that we are now where we are, that we just continue to analyze this and repeatedly discuss this. I think Mike's point that, or John's point that here we are on the night we're supposed to pass this, and we're now having policy-making conversations about what we should do with it. Obviously, this is not ready for prime time if we're still navel-gazing ourselves on this one. So I think if Mike recommends that we pull it, then maybe it's we're not ready to be able to actually make a decision on this.
Okay. As a process matter, let me know if you all think about this. That probably, we have a single ordinance to take care of all these. Shall we go through them one by one like this and just apply on them? And
Can I just say something about it? Is that charter, and you were on the charter review, is that during that was, it was a letter written from one person on charter review that kind of changed council's mind, but if I remember correctly, at charter review, everybody was in favor to say, all right, this person, if the mayor, if you're saying this for the mayor, you should say this for the council. And that's what I'm going to think on that.
Okay, so I'm going to go back to my process question here. Why don't we go through one by one, we all opine on them, and then we can come back to have a single public period for all of them, and then we can go through and vote them up and down and by motion on a single motion as they go, whoever wants to make that motion. So, is there any further?
I would just follow up that I think, John, your point is well taken, and that was my understanding of why we were changing what we were changing, was just to clarify what was unclear, whereas the other parts were not considered unclear, and it was not intended to be a policy determination. So although I opined on what my policy opinions are, that I still feel that in the favor of clarity, there's no harm, so far as I'm concerned, even given those policy opinions, in passing something that, or at least putting toward the voter anyway, something that clarifies, just to kind of clarify my position on that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And also, for the record, I was not the chair, I was vice chair. But Bill Randolph did an equal job of this. So. Okay, so let's go, Laura, if you would take us to the next one.
The next one is question 2, which is mayoral succession. This is providing for my vice mayor to complete the unexpired term of the mayor in the event of a vacancy. The This was another one that was recommended by the Charter Review Commission. This was to provide clarification of this session of in the event of a vacancy in the office of the mayor. The initial statement of this section of the charter states the vice mayor shall become the mayor for the remainder of the unexpired term. And best research, that had been the long-standing in the charter up until this 2012. The last sentence states that the new mayor shall be elected at the next scheduled municipal election. So by removing the last sentence, which is what we proposed in the question, the conflict is resolved and the vice mayor will take the place of the mayor serving out the remainder of the said term.
Okay. So again, this one is kind of, it is meant to be, well, to resolve what is apparently a conflict in the text here, where on the one hand, the person stepping in for the mayor is going to wait out the unexpired term of the mayor, and then the next sentence after that says, actually, you're going to wait until the next scheduled election, so that could be sooner than the mayor's unexpired term, could be later. But it could create a conflict, so I think this was meant to. There were a couple of issues, as I recall, in this. One of them was, are you actually the mayor for the unexpired term, or are you just there as the current charter actually says, you shall become the mayor for the remainder of the unexpired term? Or should we change that to be, you're just assuming the duties, you're not actually the mayor, and you're waiting for the next election to happen so somebody can be it. And again, my recollection of this is that, and in fact, it was, and Lori did some research on it. It was Mayor Schieferdecker, who was the guy who was the vice mayor who became the mayor, suggested it almost on the eve of adoption, and the Charter Review Commission hadn't considered it. And he said, well, why don't we just have it so that the vice mayor is, the new mayor is elected at the next scheduled election. And that was on the first reading of it. He said that in the second reading it came back and they adopted it. And I don't know that they really focused on that there's a conflict in those two.
Yeah.
You can't really hold those two thoughts in your mind at the same time. So you could take one or the other, and I think what we're being asked today is to put before the voters one that would resolve it in favor of remaining for the entire unexpired term. Do you all have any thoughts on that?
I just might want to add that whether it's mayor or council member seat, it's 3-year terms, and we run on a 2-to-1 election cycle. So seats 1 and 3, then seats 2 and 4, and then the mayor. So we would have to clean up language, whichever option you would like to choose.
Yeah, and that may have been, I mean, I can see how they conflict. This to me clearly conflicts, and it may be that they weren't thinking about like the fact that the next municipal election would necessarily be the mayor's next, that they were thinking of it even though they shouldn't have done that.
Right.
And that may have been the idea, but this one to me, like Lori said, either way we would have to change something, and it's just a matter of being in a position now where either way we kind of affect policy, whichever option we would choose. So, and I've already made it, I think, clear at other, meetings how I feel about that one.
Ben, do you have anything on that?
Nope.
Yeah. So really what we're asked to is just to go back to the way it was before, even though, I mean, this kind of puts us in an opposition because this is more than a clarification. This is a selecting which should it be, the unexpired term or the next scheduled election. And the voters last time adopted that sentence. So here we are. Do we have any thoughts about that?
Well, I don't think, that the normal average voter doesn't really understand how it works. They don't understand it's a 2-2-1, so I think they adopted it saying, yeah, that makes sense. At the next election, why wouldn't you do that? So I have no problem, taking that out.
Okay. All right, Lori, what about the next one?
The next one we've been over a few times, and there's been no opposition or really discussion on this one. This is just taking out the extra copies of other public places and offices where copies of the code will be. It'll be available at the office of the city clerk.
We have to have this one, and that's, I don't think this one's a actionable.
Yep, that makes sense to me. Next.
So here we are for the providing for the runoffs, timing thereof, and the tie breaking. The last meeting, the consensus and direction from council was to add in the 35%. So this is how this would read. For this, what it's doing is, when it was first discussed by charter review and then recommended by staff, it was to eliminate the provision of a runoff and allow candidates to be elected by plurality. So this direction would put in the 35% of votes cast, would only eliminate runoffs when a candidate receives 35% or more of the votes cast. If no candidate receives 35%, there would be a runoff between the two candidates receiving the highest total number of votes cast. In the event the two candidates receive the same number of votes, we would do the drawing of the funds to break the tie.
I have a real problem with this one. I had a problem with it last time, but I didn't speak out because it was just, we were all tired. I just wanted it to go away. But tonight we actually have to vote on it, and I think that the arbitrary 35% is absolutely ridiculous. Because when we were discussing this after charter review brought us the recommendations, and then we started talking about what we were going to do with this, of course, you know, after Lori's election, and we talked about doing a runoff, and we decided as council that we wanted to get rid of a runoff because the idea of the city having to pay for an extra election, all of us thought that was something we didn't want to actually deal with. And it's all Lori's fault. But here we are.
That Lori, not me.
Yeah, other Lori. If we are going to elect by plurality, we're going to elect by plurality. If we're going to elect with a runoff, then that's what we've decided. We can't have a plurality unless we get a runoff. And we literally pulled that number out of thin air, as Mike said, 30% plus or minus. I mean, it was like, I can't even, this drives me crazy because it's based on nothing other than a fictional idea that if we can't get a certain number of people to show up to vote, then we shouldn't let them pick who they want from a smaller pool of electors. And that makes no sense to me. So it's either a plurality or a runoff, and if it's a runoff, then we have to live with what we have. But we changed the language because we didn't want that. So then to go to a system where, oh, well, it's a plurality, but if not enough people show up, then we're punished by having a runoff, that makes no sense to me. So that's my piece.
I'm not anywhere near as passionate, obviously, as you are on this topic.
I agree.
But number of people, I think, is a completely irrelevant. I think that's a misplaced idea. It's not number of people, it's percentage of votes. And so the idea is not that 5 people showed up, it's that 20,000 showed up, or however many, and you had 7 candidates run, and are you comfortable having a mayor or a city council person who was elected with 13% of the vote? That's the issue. It has nothing to do with how many people show up. It
3
has
of
to
us
do-
were elected with nobody voting for us. 3 of us sitting out here are sitting here because no one voted for us.
So only one of us had to earn.
Mike has the floor.
Like I said, you obviously are passionate because I think you're taking this out of completely, you're citing a problem to then say that there isn't a problem. I'm not following the logic. I don't care about necessarily the percentage, as you're saying, the number was picked out in there. You're absolutely right. The fundamental question is, if 7 people were to run for office, are you comfortable with someone who receives 17 or whatever the number percentage, however the math works out, becoming either the mayor or a city council person? If the answer is yes, well then fine. Leave it as a straight majority and then we can move on. I think that was the discussion. So focusing on the percentage to me is misplacing the whole intent of having some number, which is that are you comfortable that if 7 people run, having someone who's not elected by even 1/3 of the electorate serving in the seat? So that to me is the question. If the answer to that for you is no, I don't care. If 15 people run, which I don't think we'll ever get, but we never thought that someone would actually maybe split the exact vote exactly 50-50. But if 10 people were to run and someone wins with 11% of the vote, if you're comfortable with that person sitting, then that's fine. To me, that's the question. So focusing on arbitrary nature of the percentage is misplaced, in my opinion. But I'm not as passionate.
So Mike, it would be the
honest.
percentage of the whole vote, correct?
Yes. Correct. And look, to me, that's the policy question. Are you comfortable with someone who receives some less than, obviously, even close to majority percentage serving in the office? If the answer is yes, then let's move on.
The policy question is, are we having a runoff or not?
No, that's
Well,
actually.
it's whether or not someone can be elected by plurality, I think, is the policy question. And I agree that my equivalent pet peeve is the idea of making policy decisions based on things that probably will not happen. That is one of my pet peeves that I'll be equally passionate about. And as Mike mentioned, and I'm an example of, that can be disproven. So I don't think when we're in a position to make policy decisions, it should be based on like the likelihood of things happening. That being said, I think the idea is actually more that this is geared towards a day when hopefully we do have greater turnout, we do have greater participation in people wanting to run, that if you have 7 people, then you do have someone who can win with 18% of the vote in a plurality, when if it got down to only 2, then they would have more. And so theoretically, between 2 people. So I think that it is actually more geared toward the opposite, which is a situation where we have a lot of people and things like that. But I do feel strongly about not really the 35%, so that point is well taken. I do believe that was based on, I think it was Jacob here before that day when we came up with the 35%, but I do remember it was an educated of some kind from Jacob's number, but it's more so the concept.
We asked for what
We said like
others-
30 to 40, and and
Right.
it was based on what other, because that's what, Cliff and Jacob bring to us, is the knowledge of what other people do.
And I'm not,
Is that what you pretty much see in other cities, Cliff? That-
Well, what we see in other cities is what runoffs. But if you didn't have a runoff, people get uncomfortable for reasons that I understand, but it is, to Lori's point, somewhat arbitrary. Well, it's got to be at least a third. Plurality, I'd be really uncomfortable if someone got elected with 18% of the vote. Okay, I mean, you're judging a comfort level that either applies or doesn't apply depending on who you are.
So, Cliff, may I ask this only because I know this, is Ponce Inlet.
Yes,
Now, they just had a really close election, right?
they did. I think it was like a 6 or 7 vote difference.
Now, how do they do it? Is it a percentage or do they just do +1?
Well, because there was only 2, one of them had 50%.
It's just +1.
I'm okay with runoffs. It doesn't, it costs money.
Yeah.
Obviously, that's the downfall, but if you're worried that you want to have the person that is elected by the majority serve, then go to runoffs. I'm actually not disagreeing with what Lindsay's saying. I just think that the focus of the argument is misplaced. To me, it's a policy discussion of, do you want someone who receives less than, or some lower amount up? And if that's okay, then I say we pass on this one too. And let's just either go straight to, let's have
And sometimes
runoffs.
runoffs are just a popularity contest because a lot of people go out and vote already.
As
and
opposed
it's-
to-
Let me just say this, okay? I've had one experience that was really rough when it came to a runoff. Because it was about whether or not, the charter was unclear. Well, this happened in Mount Dora. Somebody sitting here close to me would know about that. And I had to render the opinion based on that particular charter that no, they didn't have a runoff when the initial vote was between only 2 candidates. They instead had a drawing of straws, which the losing straw did not like at all. But that was the way the law was provided, hence I'm no longer the attorney for Mount Dora. But the interesting thing about that, though, was that when we were having the discussion of runoffs and why one candidate felt so strongly about wanting a runoff, even though I had rendered the opinion that that's not the way to handle it, is because he was in a subdivision where he was gated, he could keep the other person through his HOA out of there from campaigning and control the outcome by manipulating who showed up on runoff day. And I am disparaging him intentionally, because that's what he wanted to do. And so, my point is that there's any form of system you come up with can be manipulated in a way that's going to be negative. So plurality to me has never been an issue. It's only an issue, depending on how you look at it. You say, well, we really don't want someone who's going to be elected by 20. Well, show up and vote in bigger numbers, or I don't know what to tell you. It's just what floats your boat.
So really, I guess the only runoff in that election was you, I guess.
Yeah.
You got run off.
You got run off.
Because I got run off. That's exactly right.
So what we have here is, the way it currently reads, if you have 2 or more candidates for the office and no candidate receives a majority, so what it says is, when one person receives 50% plus 1, he or she wins. What we want to change that to is 35%. Right, so we're really just moving the needle down from 50 to 35%.
Yeah.
But also, does our original thing talk about the tie of 2? Does the original?
Yeah, the tie part's still there.
Yeah,
So we don't need.
So really, it's just a matter, it really is a comfort level. And for me, I mean, I initially thought, like Lindsay did, that we're just going to get rid of the runoff here and just say, it'll be 50%, and if it's a dead even tie, then we're going to do the draw straws. And that's, if we don't like that, then we'll have a runoff election. If we don't like, so it's just a comfort level. So I'm happy with no runoff. I think 35% is too high. I don't know why we go to the trouble of amending the charter just to move it from 50% to 35%. It seems kind of silly to me. But if you want to go down 15% or 20%, I mean, that's a significant difference. I mean, if you end up with somebody with, let's just say theoretically there are 9 people who run and one guy gets 18% and the next guy gets 13% and the next guy, whatever the numbers are, he wins, he wins, and I don't have a problem with that person being seated. It just, but I understand also the position I heard last time. Well, maybe there's a crisis of legitimacy at that point if you don't have at least some minimum number of voters behind you, and 35% feels good. But and I just don't see the need to go from 50% down to 35%. Is that a charter? So I would get rid of the whole thing and bring the number down significantly, like 15 to 20%.
Instead of a number, can't you just say highest percentile?
No, that's what when you eliminate the runoff, that's plurality. That means whoever gets the most votes, whether it's 10%, 15%, or whatever, of how many candidates wins. But that's what you're discussing right now. If you take out that and put in a threshold number, like 20%,
Okay, I gotcha.
that's where you change it.
I think that I agree with what John and Lindsay were saying. Like, I don't think anybody would have initiated this for this reason to change it from 50 to 35. So it just, given where the conversation was last time, that's where it came from. And like Lindsay said, she didn't speak up, and so that part of the conversation just wasn't had last time. So I have no problem saying I'm not tied any more than I think Mike is to this 35%. I think it's just then I would definitely err on the side of keeping it the way it was, as opposed to anything else.
I think I would go. I would leave it as runoffs and not touch this one.
Since no one seems super excited about 35%.
Yeah.
Is that it?
The last one is the gender neutrality, which would not have the, oh no, I'm sorry. We have question 5 first, and this is adding in we codify the oath of office in the state statutes, and then add the petition submittal period prior to the qualifying period, and the qualifying period would remain unchanged.
Okay, and that's uncontroversial, right? That's something we need to do to kind of get in sync with SOE.
Yes.
All right. Any discussion on that at all? And is that the last one?
The last one is going to be the gender neutrality.
Okay.
It's question 6.
And anybody have any issues with gender neutrality?
And then there's just the
The
example.
Down Pond Summit had a problem with it.
Yeah.
You know the story?
No, but I can imagine.
Yeah, they thought it sounded woke, so we had 4 amendments, that one failed.
Yeah.
With
Yeah.
the voters, they failed with the voters.
Yes, it failed with voters by a lot, because they couldn't get past, oh, it sounds like wokeness, whatever the heck that is.
Yeah. Well, I have more faith in our president. Okay, so I think the way to do this, is, although it might be somewhat laborious, is if we're going to end up with a single motion that everybody agrees with. It may be we're going to get to the public here in a second, but it may be that the way to do it would be to somebody form the motion. Yeah, we're already doing it in a second, but yeah, somebody to form a motion that they think would capture the majority of the vote. I mean, otherwise we have to go one by one and vote them all up and down. What do you think?
Honestly, I think it's going to be harder to try to guess, because I couldn't even keep track. Because like, for example, if I use runoff, Mike wants to keep runoffs. Lori here wants to not have a percentage. I'm not exactly sure where you are, except it's less than 35 and maybe more than 15. And then, so I can't even count it.
Right.
So I would suggest that you go one by one and just figure out, okay, do you want question 1 on the ballot as is, yay or nay, and then go down that way. And then you now can say, okay, we have a majority that agree that these should be on the ballot, open the public period and see what the public says about it.
Okay.
One at a time.
It can be one at a time or all together, however you want to do that.
Okay.
So you're basically taking a straw poll and
Yeah,
setting
initially,
up
before
the
you
motion.
formulate the overall motion of what's going on the ballot. Right now, it's, would you support this being on the ballot?
So these are, but this would be really just votes that were more or less, like you said, straw poll votes.
Yes,
You're
to
not-
get us to the point of where we can formulate a motion that covers everything.
Okay, and then there's no problem doing that?
No, none at all.
All right, well, let's take it from the top then. But first, why don't we go ahead and open it up to public period, let's just open the public period. Anybody from the public like to address?
I do. Do you want to go one at a time?
But are you going to have something on each one of them?
Everyone?
Okay, we'll do it.
3 minutes.
We'll do it.
3 minutes, go. 3 minutes to me. Let's go.
Let's take it from the top, go from the top. We'll hold off on the public period.
Okay, so for the first, question 1 is clarification of term limits.
All right, clarification of term limits. This is one where, what is it? What is the language here? It is. How do we feel about this? We feel like, Laura, you want to take it as an actual vote, Cliff, or we just?
You can just poll yourselves and say, okay, do you want this on and off? And you don't even have to debate, just so we know where there's a majority, so we can formulate a motion based on what's going to the voters.
All right, well, let's just come down to this way. Okay, you would vote for that one, Vance?
Nay.
I don't think it's going to matter much, but I'll be a yay.
But a yay to have it on there.
Yes, to go to the voters.
I would no.
I'm a yes.
Okay, all right. Let's go to number 2.
Mayoral discussion.
I don't know how you do this, but I don't know if this is the right way, because you can have votes that go either way, and then you can still have a motion broken.
This allows to narrow it down.
That's possible, then you'll have to make a decision when you vote, because you're looking at the whole thing. Now, if you want to do them separate and vote on them separately, and then make that binding as what's go for, you can do that too.
But I don't think it's just, this is going to be.
Yeah, I think I'm more comfortable with doing them separate.
Well, as a reminder, we are only voting on sending these to
The voters.
the voters.
Right.
If the voters don't like them, they will turn them down, and then they will not end up being amendments to the charter. We're only voting on whether to give the voters the opportunity to vote on these. So,
Okay. Well, there's no clean way to do this, I mean, because we're going to, unless we want to have 5 different ordinances. So,
Well, yeah, that's ultimately, y'all are gonna have to come to a consensus on one ordinance with certain questions on it or not. And that's all I'm trying to get to, is where you could get, even though it may go against what you are on a specific question, okay, overall, do these 5, 6, 4, 3 questions go to the voters? That's all we're trying to find is a consensus of what goes to the
If
voters.
I vote nay for one reason and Van's votes nay for a different, but we're on different ends, then the entire thing could fail, even though we all agree.
That's absolutely correct. And then you don't have any ordinance going to the voters.
And that's not really what any of us want.
And otherwise, I gotta cut, we can't even do this on a second reading because I'm gonna have to bring back separate ordinances for each question.
Right, okay. So we're coming down to roll again, right?
Yeah.
Let's go. Okay, Lori, you want to go first? Or should we
So at
start
number
with-
2,
Yep.
I'm a no.
Vance?
Think about it.
Okay, all right. I'm a yes.
You know, you couldn't make this stuff up.
I'm a yes on this one.
All right.
I'm a no on all of them. If we could just leave them off the chart.
Lindsay, where are you?
Yes, I think we should send it to the voters.
Yes, okay.
Yeah, and I'm a yes, because it just, I mean, the only thing we would do is mess up the,
Yep.
One. Unless you want to amend the charter to add another council person.
I think this one is an easy one, but maybe I could be wrong. All right, so how do you feel about this, Lindsay?
About the printed copies,
Yes.
I think that's safe, yes.
Yes. Say, Mike?
I'm a yes.
Yes. I'm a yes. Yes?
yeah.
It's not the third.
Yes.
All right. All right.
Yes.
That's a 5
Well,
vote.
That was easy.
that was something.
It's just one of the dumber things we've all done, by the way.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Back to question 4, for the providing for runoffs, timing thereof, and tie breaking.
Okay. This is a tough one because I hate to lose the baby with the bathwater here, but because I would like to get rid of runoffs generally.
So if I could just say what it said before, and I'm sorry I didn't do it, slide overlay. So what we brought the first time was majority was replaced with plurality, and then everything else was kind of,
If you go back to the old agenda, you can see the original version.
so basically plurality, in the event that there were 2 people, it's afforded to by state statute that you would draw lots. That was what it was, the initial, this is,
Plurality became at least 35%.
So let me just say, I completely understand Lindsay's point. I understand the point of that it's completely an arbitrary number, and I think we got to this arbitrary number because we weren't sure what the other issues are, and I'll be honest, I'm not super passionate about any of these charter amendments, which is my point on, like, they're just not, none of these are, the one thing on this one, and picking 35% or going away from runoffs is, I always think you shouldn't make a decision based on like a certain recent fact pattern, and we have this unique 50-50 tie. I would pass on this one because I think there is some merit to having somebody who is elected by the majority, and that would be my thought is just let this thought go for a little bit and see where we end up, just because we're not reacting to the fact that we didn't want to have a runoff when someone was so close to 50-50, whereas when you have a different experience in a different election, people might react differently. So that's my sensitivity, is that making a decision on something right away.
So you just leave it as is?
I would not, yeah, I would leave it so that someone gets 50% plus 1.
I'm just gonna say on the numbers, yes, she was at 50%, but the other 2 were split. Very like
Completely understand.
13% and the other, I mean.
They weren't actually split because the
Right.
vote as certified, we had a clear winner.
My concern with runoffs, and when we originally brought this up, it was not necessarily, Lori presented the issue because it happened, but my whole thing during the entire election process with 3 candidates was, I'm really annoyed if we end up in a runoff situation here, because it's gonna cost us $20,000 to run an election again. More than $20,000. That's my underlying concern on this, is the fiscal economics of running a runoff election, which just to me seems untenable when we have another way of doing it, which would cost us more money to do a separate election. That's all it is. It's a money thing. I just don't want us as a city spending more money on a runoff election. I think it's a waste of our city's money.
Okay, so let me do this 2 ways, okay? Let's say, I understand your position, Mike, I understand your position, Lori, Lizzie, and, but just to make sure that we're not gonna throw the baby out with the bathwater, we may well, we really are, we have 2 choices here. We can, why don't we take a vote, a straw poll, on whether we want to get rid of runoffs entirely, which I think is a legitimate solution, and then let's run another one where we have the 35%. We might lose on both of those. So, you know what I mean? Because we're voting on different things for different reasons in the same stuff, one here. So can we run that one real fast? You see what I'm saying?
I would like to go with the language that was proposed on September 12th.
Okay.
Which is plurality, right?
Right, which is the original language that was proposed.
And that would do away with runoffs, essentially, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you're okay with removing all runoffs?
Could we read that language? We have that still?
If you take the language in front of you right now,
Right.
where it says at least 35%, say plurality. That's the
Okay.
difference.
Basically, whoever gets the most votes wins regardless of how much they went by.
Okay, so on the issue of whether we want to just do that, meaning there would be no runoff elections, which somebody gets plurality. Let's go there. Let's try that. Lindsay, you would do that. You would be a yes for that, right?
I would go with the original language as proposed on September 12th, not the language that was amended for tonight.
Okay. Right. Yeah, right.
I think
Mike, what would you do?
if we're gonna put it on the ballot at all, this is not something that excites me either way, so. Whatever gets this through.
Whatever gets what through.
Whatever gets the motion to pass, I'm for that. It doesn't, to me, this is, again, I would have let this sit, but sure, let's get rid of runoffs.
Okay. I would remove all, yes. I'm with Lindsay on that one. Vance, where are you?
Yeah, I was going with the whole thought of just leaving it as is, but no, I'm agreeing with Lindsay. That's a good way to go.
Okay. Lori?
I'm a no.
No. Okay. And
And you're a no, because you would do what?
the 35%?
I'm a no because I don't believe in having the way that it was written as of last meeting, which is what I believe we're talking about.
50 plus 1?
No, I don't believe it. What we're talking about how it was at the last meeting, which was that just a plurality.
Yes.
I don't agree that a plurality alone should be sufficient to win an election by itself.
Wow. So you would go more than, you would have runoffs?
There are a lot of other things, and I think this is what John's trying to accomplish, because get me wrong, John, but if 3 of us believe that a plurality is sufficient, then it doesn't really matter to debate all the other semantics. I mean, isn't that the idea?
Yes.
Well, I'm with you. Look, I'm with you on the fact that there should be runoffs, but I agree with Lindsay too, that 35% is.
Right, no,
So.
I agree with that middle ground, and I believe that's how we arrived here, is because of our willingness to compromise on this.
Right.
But I think that what we just did the straw poll on represents, I don't want to say a lack of compromise in a negative way, but like the other extreme.
That's the problem, is that the compromise on this one is tough. Like, you're right. I think there was hey, we should still have runoffs in certain situations, and we backed off 50%, and 35% got picked out, but.
There's no price to democracy. That's.
Well, there is that. There is that.
That's
There is the $20,000.
You can quote me
grant
right now.
scheme. Is it that really, should we really be basing our discussion on $20,000? I mean,
But also, this meeting last 2 weeks ago on the 12th was not the first time we had ever had this discussion. It was like the 5th time we had had this discussion. And it had gone through various steps of other conversations we had had up to that point. Like Lori and Mark didn't just imagine these, whatever, ballot measures. These are based on our feedback, our conversations, and our sentiments on what we wanted to see, right? We worked on this over multiple meetings to get to the point where at one meeting, they said, okay, we're going to take your feedback and now we're going to turn this into proposed ballot measures. So it wasn't like this was imaginary. We had already talked about all these things. So I'm just as frustrated that this happened on the last meeting where all of a sudden we're like, wait a minute, we've changed our minds, we want to do something completely different. It's like, well, we had 4 other meetings or 5 other meetings before that where we'd all had a consensus on where we got to. So again, if it wasn't ready for prime time, we should have dealt with it before it came to us on the 12th.
In fairness, that's true of the 35% though too. That comes from a consensus of what was said at the last meeting. And the last meeting was the first time I was a part of a public discussion on this one because I'm new here. But the 35%, like the same thing could be said of where we are right now because there was no objection to that last meeting. No one said anything then. So, but nonetheless, like I don't think it even matters if Mike's, from what I'm hearing in the straw poll, I don't even think it matters if Mike's vote on the straw poll changes. I hear even 3.
right, there are 3 either way. But.
Either way, so I think that's the point of what John's trying to do is avoid further discussion. If it's not, I don't need to be heard honestly for any other purpose if it's not going to change votes, so.
Right. Well, it was also, this was, as it says here, was discussed by the Charter Review Commission, but it was recommended by staff. So the Charter Review Commission didn't present us with something, and I think staff, probably in reaction largely to what they've heard up here, put this together. And that's just a historical note to know. So we're not disappointing anybody in the Charter Review Commission by not taking this up.
This is also loosely from Bill Cowles' supervisor of elections, wrap up after election, luncheon in May. Another loose suggestion of his.
Because he doesn't want to do runoffs.
Well, one thing we have to look at, and you can also see we're changing in there, was the time frame. The 4 weeks, which we do have that accounted for, changing in there.
But if y'all went back to the original language that was presented to us last meeting, would it require an additional reading, Cliff?
If we changed what's in here just to go to a different percentage or something, the answer is no, because we're still telling the public we're changing the charter in these areas. If we added something new, or if we brought out 6 new ordinances, then you're going to have to start over.
I mean, obviously, I'm not the one that's going to make the motion, but it sounds like there could be a separate motion on this one that you will have at least 3 votes on, as it was presented last time. Right?
So what you're saying, Lori, is at least we should clean up some part of it. That's another baby and bathwater issue. If we're not going to take this up, or we're not going to deal with it, Bill Cowles said he can't really hold an election within 4 weeks necessarily after the municipal election one more time.
And historically, it's been the 5th or 6th week after.
I think where this is leaning is that we're going to get rid of runoffs, and then when there's no runoff and there's a lot of people, then the next city council or the next charter review commission can recommend that we change it if they found it to be a problem. I think what I'm hearing more here up here is that there's just a sensitivity to having a runoff plurality. That's what I'm hearing, and then we'll just see where that plays.
Again, we're putting this to the voters to let them decide. So we're giving them an alternative to what they currently have, which is 50 plus 1. If they don't want a runoff, then they can vote in favor of changing the charter. We're only making a recommendation to put it on the ballot to let the voters choose.
And for that, we have 4, perhaps 5 out of us would agree to go with the September 12th language. Is that right? Yes. Okay. And so what is the next?
This was the petitions open, the qualifying, this is taking out the oath that didn't meet the Florida statute exactly. Just using that statute and adding in the petition submittal period that would be prior to the qualifying period would remain unchanged.
I think we get a simple head bob on this. Everybody's good
Yeah.
on that one?
Yeah.
All right. And number 6?
It's gender neutral.
Anybody got a problem with genders? No. Hearing none. Okay. Thank you. So let's open the public here now. How about it, Dale?
Sure. Plurality. Obviously, my being the only guy I want to wait to answer the court. Yeah, I'm a fan of plurality regarding runoffs. We had a long-standing former city clerk that would have given up body parts to avoid, to have that go away. The mayoral succession, John, we've already lived through it. We know how it works. And so it makes it important who you guys happen to elect as a vice mayor. Never forget. And we knew that in advance before that election happened back in those days. Remember, John?
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, you know, Bill Cowles would be better in a better way of knowing how number 5 would work. I'll defer to his judgment. And you're absolutely right, Lindsay, in that the residents, and I'm also going to agree with Mr. Wiles. I'm not a fan of putting additional, charter amendments out there. I survived 29 the last time, and Bill will never let me hear the end of it, and I understand. Now, there were things that, again, I don't believe our residents clearly understood as a part of that. I know I was one of the ones that voted. So, again, I don't want to do things simply to be putting amendments out there for our residents to vote for. Thanks.
Thank you, Dale. All right, that's a good point.
I like talking to 20,000 people.
All right. Is anybody else in the public? I don't see any other public here. Oh, Stacy's still. Yes. Let's close the public here.
I'm gonna make a stab at it,
Okay, because I got my tallies here. The only one that's a problem is 4, in terms of at least finding a majority, but on 4, that's still complicated.
but, so we're ready for a motion there?
Yes, please.
Okay. So I would make a motion to put questions 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 on the ballot with the references in the runoff section to refer to plurality to eliminate runoffs.
You do not want to question one, correct?
Do not want question.
Okay.
Pretty clean.
Okay, and so just for clarification on that, Mike, the number 4, you would go back to the September 12th?
I don't know what September 12th was, so that's why I'm trying to be just clean to say that the section would be referenced to eliminate runoffs and say that whoever gets the most votes wins, which I believe was the. I don't remember what happened on September 12th. So just whoever gets a plurality, then there's no need for a runoff, because that's what I heard. And again, there's been a lot of emotion. I thought we got there based on what I thought I heard was feedback. That's how I think that number got there. But I heard today that there's just issues with that number. So I think it was all well intended of how that number got out. But I think in the end, what I'm hearing now is just more concerns on an arbitrary of the number, which I completely understand in that position. So that's where I am.
Okay, and so it would read that when there are two or more candidates for the office of mayor or for a council seat, and when no candidate receives a plurality of the votes cast, then a runoff is held.
No, that you,
No.
So then you go to lots.
You go lots.
no, plurality is just top vote getter.
Yeah.
And the only way you would have lots is if
There's a tie.
two people get the same number.
There's a tie.
Or even a three-way tie, or even a four-way, same.
Okay.
I just want to clarify, you're saying 2 through 6, but when I was writing them all down, we got 3 votes for yes on number 1.
You did.
So that would be 1 through 6, which is the entire slate, not 2 through 6.
And he might be intentionally leaving out one.
Yeah, he is.
Yes.
Well,
He's moving something different than what y'all got a majority.
Okay, I just wanted to.
I didn't know that. I'm sorry. I
Okay.
didn't realize it.
Yeah, it was 3-2 on one.
I'm sorry. I actually heard that. I didn't realize.
And-
No, that's fine, I just wanted to make sure we were all on the same page.
I voted no on one. I thought I heard 3, but I.
No, that was very clever, you don't slip out on that.
It was 3-2 on
I know I
one.
wouldn't get past anybody.
3-2 on one, 4-1 on two, 5-0 on three, 3-2 on four, 5-0 and 5-0 on 6, on 5 and 6.
So now you want, we're starting with 1, right? We're going to do the whole slate.
You want to amend your motion?
So essentially, the motion is that we're going to put them all up with, yeah, I just, look, for purposes of getting this thing over, sure. Because I honestly, my personal opinion, again, is to limit the amount of questions on a charter. I just think it's, so if
Yeah,
there's
so let's take
one.
one
I think
if
the
there's-
issue is if they're all on there together, like 1 through 6, or if you leave off one, like I will be a nay because of 4, and I was one of the deciding nays on 1, so it affects, like, that's the whole issue. If I would be causing a giant problem.
And if you want, I actually now pulled up the language from the 12th on 4. It's pretty straightforward, which is the runoff provision. So if anybody needs a reminder, basically Section C is eliminated from runoff election all the way down to cast in the general city election. Instead, it says determination of candidates elected. The candidate receiving the highest number of votes cast in a general or special election for an office shall be elected to the office. In case 2 or more candidates receive an equal and highest number of votes for the same office, such person shall draw lots to determine who shall be elected to the office. So that's the plurality. That's what was on the 12th.
I understand, and like I said, I really think that, aside from all the debate, I think how we got to that number was an interest to try to get a consensus on all these questions.
Right.
I really do think it was well intended. It just didn't work out. So I think that I have the same concerns that Lori has about this, but it's just in the interest of trying to get through this and put it out. The issue I have on 1 is just, I think it's unnecessary because the interpretation section of the charter clearly says that they gotta wait until the next I mean, to me, it's clear, so just let's try to limit the questions where we can. And if it's just clearly an interpretation or a clarification when there's already something in it that says, here's the interpretation, I just think it's probably not needed.
I would give my vote that way.
That's again, I'm a 2 through 6 with the clarification on 4 being plurality, recognizing that I think everyone has posed very valid concerns on this, and I hear the arguments. And then again, the attempt to get a compromise just didn't work. But that's sometimes the way it works.
Okay. So now we're at 2 through 6, right?
That's my motion. 2 through 6 with 4 being plurality.
Being the prior language.
Okay. Do we have a second on that?
So that would be leaving 1 off, Mike?
Correct.
I'll second that.
Okay. Lori,
Yes. Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison,
No.
Councilmember Wurzel,
No.
Mayor Lowndes.
So clear, so I understand, I think that passed. And so now, just for clarity going forward, question 2 will be 1, and then they will all be renumbered. So nobody gets, question 1, as question 1 goes away, so that the ballot appears question 1 will be what was question 2, and so forth.
That's a tough one, by the way, just from a procedural standpoint, because it's, no's because of different reasons. It's a tough one to get a consensus. I think everyone, even to get a consensus, we had to compromise, because it was like, well, I don't like one, but I'm going to take one in order to get another. It's just, it's a messy process.
That you all don't get the benefit of what the voters do, which is to pick and choose, unless you want to do separate ordinances.
Yeah, it's a messy process, and
And for the most part, I mean, look, it has always been the case, unless you're in Orange County where they have their own kind of special independent charter review. But it's been the case that y'all ultimately are decided to what goes on the ballot. But it's also true that in every case that I've been associated with the city, we haven't had that many charter reviews. It's basically if the charter review committee said send it on the ballot, and it wasn't crazy, it got on the ballot the way they sent it.
yeah.
So that's just the way it's been. And it's been a let the voters decide issue.
Okay. All right, it's up to the voters now. Let's adjourn the council meeting and convene the CRA. Let's do this. Let's get it out there. So now we are meeting as a CRA. And we need to approve the CRA minutes. March 14th.
Need a motion for that?
Anybody in the public have any comments on our, seeing none, close the public period, motion's in order.
To approve the minutes.
Second.
Order to call the roll.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison,
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay, Mr. City Manager, is any old business?
No, sir.
Okay. New business. We have consent agenda. We have, it's new business, we're still doing this here, I'm sorry. New business resolution fiscal year, CRA annual budget, Laura, would you read the title?
A resolution of the City of Maitland, Florida, adopting the Community Redevelopment Agency CRA budget for the fiscal year beginning October 1, 2022, and ending September 30th, 2023, appropriating funds for operating expenses, supplies, personnel, and otherwise appropriating funds for the efficient and effective operation of the CRA, providing a means to amend said budget so as to carry forward the funding for purchase orders, work orders, and grants outstanding as of September 30th, 2022, providing a means to amend the said budget to reflect grants received after September 30th, 2022, authorizing the transfer of funds herein appropriated so long as the total combined appropriations shall not be increased, thereby adopting the revenues and expenditures, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Mark, would you introduce the item, please?
Sure. You've seen this table before. It's the sort of the annotated version of the larger budget summary that's in the approved budget now. So it's not a whole lot to describe here about what the CRA is doing. We're going to continue to repay advances like we've been doing over the last couple of years with one minor change. I mean, the CRA still owes the general fund and a couple of the special revenue funds some money. So this year we repaid the road impact fee $800,000 and the general fund $1.1 million. Next year we're proposing to allocate $1.2 million in CRA funds to the Independence Lane construction and repay the road impact fee, $264,000. If this stretched out into 26, 27, and 28, it looks like it's likely that the CRA will pay off its general fund debt in 27, 28, and then all the money that's generated within the CRA will have to be put to projects directly related to the CRA.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions or more?
Good news.
Yeah. Any public comments on this? It's open to public period. And let's close the public period. Any further discussion? Not a motion being in order.
Move to approve the resolution adopting the Community Redevelopment Agency annual budget for fiscal year 2023 as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Warzel. Aye. Councilmember Wild. Aye. Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Loud.
Aye. Okay, and now let us receive the audit report. Mark, would you introduce the audit?
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. This is virtually the identical audit engagement letter that you approved in the consent agenda for the regular city council meeting. Auditors do both the audit of the city and this is a special fund, so pretty straightforward.
Okay. Any questions of Mark on the auditor's letter? Let's go to the public. Anybody in the public have any questions on the audit letter? Seeing none, let's close it. Any further discussion? And if not, motion's in order.
I'll move to receive the 2022 CRA Auditor's Communication Letter as presented.
Second.
Motion second, Laura, would you call the roll, please?
Councilmember Warzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Mayor Loud.
Aye. Okay, let's adjourn the CRA and reconvene council meeting. Mark, is there any old business?
No, sir.
Okay. Consent agenda. Does anybody wish to remove any items from the consent agenda? Is there any public comment for consent agenda items 2 through 6? Seeing none, close the public period. Laura, should your motion?
Second.
Laura, call the roll.
Councilmember Wild.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Warzel.
Aye.
Mayor Loud.
Aye. All right, let's open the public period. This time we have Taker.
Stacy's bringing us some good things.
I think so anyway. I'm sorry, I hate to come up and be the one talking when it's already a long night, but I have some stuff. First, thank you all very much for your support. I appreciate the little note on our budget. I also appreciate your moral support as libraries are under attack across the country. It is extremely reassuring to know that I have a city council and city staff who believe in the value of libraries and believe that the library is an important part of the community. So thank you. There's a big rally in Sarasota tomorrow. We don't have one, so I'm really, really glad. There are a couple of pieces of business that our board undertook at their meeting on Wednesday that I would like to bring to your attention. The first one is pretty simple. We are now pleased to welcome all business members of the Maitland Area Chamber of Commerce. They can now have one free full-service library card for their business. This is something that other communities do for their chambers. That way, the owner of the business across the street from the library who maybe doesn't live here can come use the library and take advantage of our business databases. So we're really glad to have them. The other big thing, from our previous conversations that it is a trend in library services across the country to be eliminating overdue fines, late fees. The reason this is a trend is because, in the first place, for people of means, fines are just kind of useless. They are a nuisance, they aggravate people. If you can afford the 25 cents to pay for your daily fine, you're not going to go home to pick up that book that you forgot to drop off. But you will get annoyed at me for charging you the 25 cents. But there are a lot of people in our community who can't afford it. They don't want to take on the risk of overdue fines, so they don't bring their families to the library. They don't come to story time. They don't take advantage of our classes because they don't want to take on that risk. And every outreach event we do, we always have somebody too who comes up and joke, "Oh, I'm not allowed in the library. I owe you guys money." Well, we don't want people to feel like they're not allowed in the library. So libraries across the country, Chicago, New York, Los Angeles, Tampa, Hillsborough, Citrus County, they've all already gone fine free. Winter Park and Orange County are both working on doing the same. I expect announcements from them imminently. But effective right now, the Maitland Public Library no longer has overdue fees. There are still consequences. You do still need to bring your books back. If you don't bring them back on time, you don't get new books. It's as simple as that. So you want new things, bring back the old things. If you have an ancient lost book sitting on the shelf that you have been too ashamed to bring back to us and you figure you owe us so much money, you may as well keep the book, bring the book back. You'll be back in good standing and we will get you all set up on your library account. I was asked, how are we paying for this? I do have a position that is vacant and we are going to defer hiring it, filling that position. So that will pay for the revenue hopefully for this year. So we're very, very excited. I was skipping down the aisles as the board voted for this. We've done a campaign. Mary has been putting out crazy social media things. So I hope that you all take advantage and come to my library. Bring your books back. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Stacy.
You can tell Stacy didn't used to come to the meeting 10 years ago. She'd be like, oh, this is a long night.
I remember Ellen rolling in on Tuesday mornings, having been here till dawn, but I don't want to make it.
And I will say, Stacey, I was in the library the other day, and two people in front of me, when they heard about that, they took out money and made donations because they were so excited. So hopefully, those who are able will feel.
Yeah, they've been talking about that for a couple of years now that y'all were looking to do that. So good.
Yeah, we learned about it 7 years ago from Citrus County, which has never had overdue funds from the time the Citrus County Library has existed. And we're like, we want to do that. So we've been talking about it more formally for probably about 4 years. So we're really excited that we are finally able to do this. So thank you.
Wow,
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank you, Stacy. Great news. Anybody else? Seeing none, let's close the public period. And let's get to the fun parts of the agenda, the decision items. Hill Rec Park Award, we got a grant.
Yes.
Mark, would you like to introduce
Sure.
that?
Yeah, this is pretty straightforward. As we were actually completing the Hill Rec Park with the playground and the improvements over there, Jay saw there was a grant available for $50,000. It's a FERDAP grant, and the FERDAP grant does have the requirement that if you get the grant, that the park has to remain as outdoor recreation in perpetuity. We had this discussion with Hill Rec when we received a couple $100,000 grant there. At the time, the city council determined that they did not want that requirement on Fort Maitland. So that we gave that grant back. So as these come up, if there is a requirement to keep it in recreation for a period of time, we're bringing these forward to City Council for a decision to determine whether we keep the money or give it back. That's really the situation here.
Okay. Great. Does anybody have any questions of Mark or Jay?
I'm just gonna, this was the same thing that happened at Fort Maitland, and we turned down the money, but, I think we had, and the reason was we didn't want to tie the hands of future councils. But I think these are two different, you could really have two different uses. I think what being on the water was kind of our idea. We didn't want to just tie that down in case there's something in the future that they could do with that. So I don't know with this, the Hill Rec is kind of really in a residential neighborhood. So I thought I'd just bring that up for discussion since we already, went through this once.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay, let's open the public hearing swiftly and then close it.
Move to authorize the mayor to accept the $50,000 award from the Board of Recreation Development Assistance Program for Hill Recreation Park.
A second.
Laura, would you please call the roll?
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wiley. Mayor Lowndes.
Okay, and now we're on to another ordinance for the evening. Laurie, would you please read the ordinance title?
An ordinance of the City of Maitland, Florida, amending Chapter 20, Water, Sewers, and Sewage Disposal to provide for service charges, fees, and billing and collection by interlocal, and providing for conflicts, severability, providing for repeal and conflicting resolution, and providing for an effective date.
Okay, thank you. Mark?
Yeah, just real briefly on this, I think I've talked to all you about this. This was an issue we saw as we went through the discussion on the utility rates, whether about the efficiency of adopting them by resolution. So we went ahead and adopted them by resolution. Fortunately, since we were doing a parallel review of the charter and the fact that it didn't seem to jive when we were also looking at the charter and looking at the franchise agreements, why we were doing ordinances for little franchise agreements for solid waste disposal. I asked Jerry why would we do that for such small little franchise agreements. His answer was, it's in the charter. I said, okay, so he sent it to me, emailed it to me, said, yep, franchise agreements have to be approved by ordinance. Next thing in line after franchise agreements is utility rates have to be adopted by ordinance. I was not aware that was there when we were doing our review of everything. We were looking at the ordinances versus the charter. That's sort of a strange place for something like that to be, but we did see it. So what this amounts to is a corrective ordinance that adopts the fees that we had before back into an ordinance, into the code. Fortunately, we're getting ready to do some cleanup stuff anyway. Those are outlined in the staff report as far as clarifications on how we handle very specific items in terms of if someone has an oversized meter that they're using for single use, like a fire line that's being used for potable purposes, how those charges work, how deposits work to keep that a little bit cleaner for the customer, and outside city surcharges. So those are going to get put back in anyway, so we're going to have to come back to you anyway, so we've incorporated those into the ordinance. The fees have not changed. They're the same fees that you've adopted in the resolution. We just have to come back and do it by ordinance now. So if you have any specific questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So you think it's easier to do this than for us to change the charter?
Too soon. Too soon.
All right, sorry. Because we got the power.
love it.
All right.
I think we should study it.
Anybody have any questions or more? Let's go to the public on this and see if anybody wants to close it. Any further discussion? If not, a motion will be able to.
I'll move to introduce an ordinance adopting the utility fee schedule and set the public hearing date for October 10th, 2022.
Have a motion?
Second.
Yeah, a second. Laura, would you call the roll?
Councilmember Hall Harrison.
Aye.
Councilmember Wurzel.
Aye.
Councilmember Wiley.
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie.
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Okay. Reports, Mr. City Attorney.
Well, I didn't intend to have one, and I'm raising this, Mark, and I'm certainly not trying to throw a curveball, but as I was sitting over here trying to keep up with charter stuff, I also saw where the city of St. Cloud tonight declared a state of emergency so it could apply for and receive FEMA aid. And I don't know if that's something we should do also, since we're here. And so if we need to do that and we're here, I'm telling you.
You're stealing my thunder.
Oh, sorry.
He's right, we should, and the proclamation's ready, and I was gonna be a big shot. Timing, so.
Good city attorney.
We should call on Mark first next time.
Claim your credit here.
I mean, does that have to be approved by a charter?
No, it doesn't, but, but, are you done, Cliff?
Yeah. That's all. I just want to make sure that we didn't leave this opportunity if we needed to do it, and we did it.
No other major announcement that Mark has made.
Well, can we ask the question on ratifying it? Or do we need to get
Yeah, I think we just need to ratify it tonight.
Okay.
Yeah, just to save us from.
So we need to
potential-
consider this while we're ratifying it, and that's.
Consensus of what, I'm sorry?
They can
They can vote,
signs
they can
it.
vote, it's proclamation, they can ratify that tonight.
100%.
Okay.
Again, for sunshine purposes, it doesn't even have to be on the agenda, so it's good. You're good.
Yeah, the issue is the mayor can sign the proclamation declaring a state of emergency. If it lasts more than 7 or 10 days, depending whether you look at our ordinances or the statute, then you would have to ratify it to continue that. So the easier thing to do is to have you ratify the proclamation tonight, so that gives us that window to get through whatever's going to be happening over the next few days.
Okay, so this is not going to require a formal vote, it's just something, or do we need to sort of take a vote?
Well, if you have this is the thing about being sort of a ceremonial mayor, you probably need to make sure you're authorized. It's an emergency thing, so you generally have that authority anyway, but if you want to.
We would have to come back anyway if it extended, so.
So if we voted on it, we cover our bases.
Yes.
Yes, please.
There we go.
Yes. So it'd be like a motion to authorize the mayor to approve the emergency proclamation for hurricane.
That's my motion right there.
There you go.
I'll second that beautiful motion.
Excellent.
Okay, Councilmember Wurzel,
Aye.
Councilmember Wild,
Aye.
Councilmember Guthrie,
Aye.
Councilmember Holly Harrison,
Aye.
Mayor Lowndes.
Aye. Mr. City Manager, anything more?
There is an emergency coming.
Yes.
Maybe.
Yeah, I'm confident it's coming. I'm going to be pessimistic and suggest that we're going to get walloped by this thing. Based upon, I'm just pulling up the
Yeah, I just pulled up the 8 o'clock.
The 8 o'clock. It looks like there's been another little shift to the east. So all of us that have the experience with hurricanes know that the east side of the storm is going to be the worst side of the storm. So unless it takes a hard right turn and goes south of us, we're predicting that it's going to be a rough Thursday, Friday, possibly into Wednesday also. So the chief has activated the EOC as of 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. We've already put our plans in place. We had a meeting over at the fire department this morning. All the departments have their marching orders. Storm drains are being cleaned, equipment's being tuned up, generators are being serviced, pumps are being placed. Our sandbagging operation will start tomorrow with a self-fill station at the community park.
10 bags, right?
10 bags each, Maitland residents only. So that'll last for one day, because then we have to shift back into real get-ready mode, because we should be feeling the effects, we believe, the National Hurricane Center by Wednesday. That's where we need to get our act together to weather the storm and then move into the recovery phase. So here we are.
And Orange County takes care of the whole, to put people that might want to leave their home, not feel safe, into other.
Yeah, they
That's the Orange County
the city
responsibility, right?
Yeah. Yep. So, likely, decision hasn't been made yet. We'll be meeting tomorrow. Staff level will be sending employees home Wednesday sometime, but depending on the track of the storm and timing of the storm. We might have them just not report on Wednesday. Might have to go home halfway through the day. Just have to make sure they're safe and traveling to and from City Hall and Public Works and public safety buildings. So,
Now, we have all the social media and communication up and running with all the residents. Everybody's well apprised of what's happening. I'm sure Robert is.
if they're paying attention,
all
if they're paying attention.
Okay.
Looks like it.
About sandbags tomorrow.
That's already gone.
And everyone's on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
paying attention.
You know, the bad thing is, it goes, if you look at it, it goes 2 p.m. outside of Tampa, and then 2 p.m. Thursday, it sits on top of Tampa.
Yes.
So it's going to sit there and just churn for a while, instead of getting out of here.
Yeah.
All right.
That's all I have.
Okay. Mrs. Sitcom?
Oh, nothing. And we don't do the charter for 10 years. That should make everybody
Okay,
happy.
yeah, all right, good to know. Anybody, any council members have anything?
Just to let council know, so that it doesn't come as a surprise, I am going to be up for the next two meetings, the 10th and the 24th. The 10th, I have to attend the American Land Title Association conference in San Diego. I'll be gone the whole week, and then the 24th, same thing, but different conference. So both industry things, both boards I'm on, both things I can't avoid going to, so.
Okay. Wow, okay. Anybody else? Announcements, anything you'd like to share with us, anything at all?
No, I mean, given that Linda's going to be out next two, is probably not the next two, but I think we're getting close to the time where we discuss the city manager role here. I think it's about time. I know you're out, so it doesn't seem fair to do it in the next 2 meetings.
Is that something we could do as a workshop?
Workshop, that's what I was just thinking.
I'm here between those 2 weeks. Those are the 2 weeks I'm out, but I'm here between those 2 weeks and then.
On Monday? You want to Monday?
But I don't know that we have to have it. I mean, because the problem is, we have only one meeting in November, right?
Yes.
So
We're running out of time.
the issue would just be setting it for the first week of November. I'm good with that, but
I agree with Lindsay, workshop, and that way we can just kind of beat it down and around and not have to worry about trying to run through it real quick with everything else on the agenda.
The 3rd and the 17th, both the following Mondays.
So if we're going to take action, though, I don't know if we do that at the workshop, we have a special meeting.
Yeah.
But we need to, either we're going to take an action that we need to vote on. I'm not sure a workshop will do it. I mean, workshop, a special meeting can be easily called if we want to do that. How do you feel about the urgency of that? I mean, it's not urgency. It could be a special meeting for this purpose. It doesn't have to be an urgent item, but
I say we could, given what Lindsay said, like I said, if she wasn't going to, I was thinking we would do it in October, because I think it's good to, I think the longer it goes, I think it's unnecessary, I think we should, anyway, but I would not call a special meeting, I would just set it for the first week in November. But I would firmly, that's what I would put on the agenda.
The first meeting in November, though, is not until the 14th. November, so kind of in the middle.
So it seems like it's the first meeting that we're all going to be here. And that's what my thought.
okay.
So November 17th and November.
That would be my November 14th week, or is it 17th? What you said? I thought you said November, but whatever it is.
Yeah, we almost like 3 weeks without a meeting.
So, either that or I would say we call a meeting in that first week of November to have some sort of like you said, John, a special meeting, not a workshop, a special meeting. So I'm open for either one, but I would probably lean towards not bringing me in another meeting.
Okay.
I'm open for thoughts on that.
All right. Anybody have any thoughts on that?
I'm good either way.
November? All right. Okay, well, that's good. We'll think about that. We have the opportunity.
That's your call. Honestly, John, that's yours. So if you think it should be earlier, that's.
Vance, anything?
Orlando City's winning, FSU's winning, and Miami Dolphins are winning. I'm very happy. That's it.
My fantasy team is doing quite well.
What sport is it?
I don't even do well on my
We have fantasy soccer.
All right. In your head, that's your report?
Yes.
All right, good. Well, then let's call it done then. Thank you all for hanging in here with us.
Dude, my team can get its first win. Barely over 100 points.